All right, he's ready. 1 second. Come on. Come on. Yeah.
Thanks, McFarlane. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, McFarlane. Good to be with you guys today. When you hit 50, or around 50, your eyesight goes. So what you see on your screen here is really just a nod to everyone else in their 50s, just especially if you're at the back of the room. That's about as big as the font or small as the font is going to get. There's a bit of a story behind that. This was a Ukrainian immigrant who came to our country to get a job. To get a job, he needed a vehicle license. To get a vehicle license, he had to get his eyes tested. Clark said, "Can you read that?" He was like, "Read that? I know the guy." You know, so... We're talking mental floss. Before we get into mental floss, can I see by show of hands, how many of you floss on a regular basis? This kind of floss. All right. Okay, not bad. You can stop. Seriously, science has shown that flossing has got zero benefits when it comes to preventing gum disease or cavities. If you have a food trap, fine. But if you want to prevent gum disease, you can stop. It has no impact. In fact, it often does more harm than good. Now you know, just save you an extra minute in the day. Well, you probably have breakfast as well, because breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I'm afraid it's not. Another myth that we've been fed. In fact, science now shows those that skip breakfast manage their weight better than those who have breakfast. All right? Just saying, guys. Saved you more time. What about coffee? And I can hear some of you going, don't go there. Don't go to the holy elixir. You know, what about coffee? Good news is that coffee is good for you. It really is. Halle Jollyluja, yes. But this is science. This is not opinion, this is science. So Harvard did this amazing study on around 20,000 individuals over 10 years, and essentially the study showed that the more coffee you and I drink, the longer we're going to live. All right? Coffee protects us from diabetes, from certain cancers, from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, depression. All right? And it's the antioxidants in coffee, not the caffeine. And that same study went on to ask this question: how many cups of coffee a day is good for you? The answer? 6. 6 cups of coffee. And it comes with a rider, though. None of the white stuff. So no milk, no sugar, just black coffee. And you're going to live longer. All right? This is the oldest lady that ever lived, talking about living longer. Jean-Louise Calmar. She's no longer with us. She died at the age of 122, all right? Way back in August of 1997. She grew up in France. She remembered the Eiffel Tower being erected. I mean, way back when, hey? In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the French turned off the lights of the Eiffel Tower in honor of the Queen's passing. She must have meant a whole lot more to South Africa, because we turned off half the country. I mean, but I'm off track. So she saw the Eiffel Tower being erected. She remembered a mean old man coming to buy paint from her father, a man called Van Gogh. She rode a bike until the age of 100. In fact, she quit smoking at the age of 115. All right? Yeah. Felt it was becoming a habit. It was a... On her 120th birthday, they had a big celebration for her 2 years before she passed away, and she spoke. And she said some fascinating things. She said, at 120, I realized I have no peer pressure, which, thank you very much. In fact, she also said, I only have one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it, which was too much information. But then she said this, and this is profound. She said, if I could live my life over, I would trade a long life for a good life. Isn't that interesting? Quality over quantity. And the question then was, dear Jean-Louise, what is a good life? And I love to answer, quite simply, a life of no regret. That's it. Really cool. So there was this palliative care nurse called Bronnie Ware, Australian nurse who'd spent 20 years caring for the sick and the dying on their deathbeds. That's what palliative care is. And she wrote a book around the top regrets of the dying, having spent time with all these people. Do you know what the top 3 regrets of the dying were? I want to touch on one of them. But the first regret, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Imagine that. Second regret, I wish I'd been true to myself and not what others expected of me. Fascinating. Third regret, I wish I'd let myself be happier. I loved that. And the implication is happiness is a choice. Is it? Science says so. Science says it is. In fact, 90% of your long-term happiness is not predicted by your external circumstances. It's predicted by how your brain interprets those circumstances. In fact, it's not reality that shapes us. It's how our brain views the world that shapes reality. And I'll give you a good example. McFarlane was talking about parents. If you are a parent, you would have at some point witnessed older brother hitting younger sister and then panicking and trying to get her not to cry and go and tell mom and dad. And what did big brother do? He would tell a joke, he would make her laugh, he would sort of, I'm losing the slide here, where are we? Just try and divert her attention, hit himself just to get her to not start crying and go to mom and dad. And it worked. Why? Well, you'd be surprised to hear this, but your brain has limited resources. And your brain can either take those resources and focus on the negativity, the pain, the stress, or it can allocate those resources to hope, to positivity, to optimism, if you like. But it can't do both. And so little sister here is faced with either I experience the pain or I laugh, but I can't do both. I have to choose. And it's exactly the same for you and I. Now, sadly, over the last decades, many decades, psychology has focused on the negative side of things, on how to fix what's wrong with us, not celebrating what's right with us. In fact, the founder of positive psychology, who upended all of that, a guy called Dr. Martin Seligman, said at his inaugural speech as the president of the American Psychological Association almost 20 years ago, said this: we've half-baked psychology. We've baked the part about mental illness, and we've neglected the part about mental health. At that point, we had 4,000 studies on depression and less than 400 studies on joy. What were we thinking? That if we study depression and invert it, we get joy? Joy, beg your pardon. I mean, that's absurd. But before you laugh at the absurdity, think about this for a moment. That's how we think. How many parents in the room? Just so we can see. Parents? Okay, you guys, I'm one of them, are part of the problem, okay? Here's why. So Gallup, big organization, big research organization, sends a study or does a study on parents. They say your child comes home with a report card, all right? Said report card has basically two results, an A for mathematics, and an A for English, and an F for mathematics, all right? As a parent, what subject do you give your attention to? Now, keep in mind, the question wasn't what subject do you focus on and ignore all the rest. It's what subject do you give your attention to? 77% of parents said mathematics, which is really sad because it means that's how we think, but it also means that here's a child that's been characterized by the people that love him most and want the best for him by the thing that he is not. How many little Shakespeares haven't slipped through our school systems because they've been in extra maths on a Friday and not extra English? It's a serious question. Science shows us that when we focus on the positive, our marks go up, even maths. But when we focus on the negative, on the F for mathematics, everything comes down. Focus on the positive, you get a flourishing child. Focus on the negative, you get a floundering child, an unhappy kid. And as parents, we all know we're only as happy as our most unhappy child. Can you see we've got it all wrong? It's how we think. In fact, here's another great illustration for you. If I were to ask you now, what's the opposite of unhappy? What would you say? Most of you, I'm guessing, would say happy. But think about that for a moment. If the opposite of unhappy was happy, then technically I could go bang my head against this podium until I was unhappy, just so I could stop to become happy. Are you with me? How crazy that we even think that. No, the opposite of unhappy is simply not unhappy. Okay? Stay with me on this. This is tricky, I know, but it's important. You need to get this. Let me dig a little deeper into that. If you had a badly sprained ankle, would you be unhappy with that sprained ankle, limping around the convention center? Absolutely. How many of you, honestly, got up this morning, felt your ankle, and went, "Dear God, thank you for my healthy ankle. I feel so happy." No, you didn't. The fact that you have healthy ankles doesn't make you happy. It makes you not unhappy. When I come home late for dinner, my wife is unhappy. On the days that I come home in time for dinner, is she happy or just not unhappy? A husband there knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, you with me? Okay. And the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is happiness is not a default setting. Happiness is a pursuit. And you pursue happiness not by trying to remove unhappiness, because then you just get mediocre or not unhappy. You pursue happiness by focusing on how to get happiness. And we're going to focus on that. And thankfully, science today, scientists, psychologists have been focusing on what makes people thrive, on what behaviors and actions lead to just thriving in relationships and work and productivity. It's called positive psychology, or what we now refer to it as the science of happiness. All right? It's a science. In fact, Martin Seligman, this founder of positive psychology, made this statement, and I want to kind of just pause on that for a moment. He said, what positive psychology doesn't do is it doesn't turn a blind eye to suffering and to mental illness. It really just encourages individuals to adopt practices that boost optimism, that increase resilience, and help them to live happy and engaged lives. In other words, there's a big difference between mental illness and mental health. But today, we use those phrases interchangeably like they're the same thing. They are not. We all have mental health in the same way that we all have physical health. Some days good, some days bad. The World Health Organization says there is no health without mental health. But we don't all have a mental illness. There's a difference. Mental health is our emotions, how we feel, how we behave. It's how we respond to crises, how we deal with problems, our social connections. Mental illness is generally a diagnosis. It's something that requires treatment. It's depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. It's not mental health. In fact, you can have good mental health and still have a mental illness. In the same way that you can have poor mental health in the absence of mental illness. Through your lifetime, not everyone's going to experience mental illness, but everyone will experience mental health. And ladies and gentlemen, we can control mental health. We can have an impact on that. We have very little control over mental illness. So, in the next 10 minutes or so, let's focus, 7 minutes, let's focus on what we can do and what we can control, our mental health, our approach to life, that kind of mental optimism, if you like. Because positive psychology essentially says this: when we feel optimistic, when we feel good, we are more intelligent, we're more creative, we're more engaged, and we experience more success. And that flow is really important. It's first happiness, then success. In other words, success is not dependent on happiness. In fact, happiness is not dependent on success. Success is dependent on happiness. Just park that for a moment. That's quite a significant statement. Success revolves around happiness, not the other way around. If you think about the neurobiology of that, the science of that, when we experience positive emotions, our brain gets flooded with dopamine and serotonin. Let me see if I can catch up somewhere there. There we go. Dopamine and serotonin are neurochemicals that A, make us feel good, and B, boost the centers of our brains that are responsible for learning and processing. So we get smarter. I mean, in layman's terms, if you're in a good mood, you're going to ace your maths test, essentially. All right? I mean, it's as simple as that. But happiness has far more profound impacts than that. In fact, on studies into happiness, the science of happiness, I'm talking over 200 studies now and over 300,000 participants, we found that happiness leads to success, not the other way around, in almost every domain of life: relationships, work, health, creativity. I mean, it's quite phenomenal. In fact, and companies know this, by the way. That's why we have wellness weeks. I mean, you've had a wellness week, I'm sure. On Monday, we're going to have an expert speak to us about depression. On Tuesday, we're going to talk about beating burnout. On Wednesday, it's how to avoid the negative impact of high stress. On Thursday, it's alcohol and drug abuse. Guys, that's not a wellness week, that's a sickness week, all right? I mean, hello. We're missing the point. We're focusing on the negative, not the positive, because we're hardwired for negativity. We've got to reverse that process. We've got to think differently. Why? Because our brains don't work that way. I mean, most of the formula for success for most companies is I work hard, and then I'm successful, and then I'm happy. All right? In fact, that's pretty much how we parent and motivate people as well. But that's scientifically broken and backwards. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, if happiness is on the other side of success, when our brain experiences success, what do? We move the goalposts. So you get good grades, now you need to get better grades. You get a good job, got to get a better job. Good salary, better salary. You make some great sales, now we're going to give you stretch targets, And our brain knows that. And so success, happiness lies on the other side of success, but our brain never experienced success. And so as a society, we've pushed happiness over the horizon. We're never going to get there. Conversely, our brain doesn't work that way. If you can lift someone's positivity in the present, we get something called a happiness advantage. All right? What is a happiness advantage? A happiness advantage means a brain at positive is significantly functioning way better than a brain at neutral or negative or stressed. All right? Which means you're smarter, you're more engaged, you're more motivated, you're more creative when your brain is at a positive or in a positive state. And we've seen that in all aspects of business. 31, you want to know the numbers, I'm giving you the numbers. 31% more productive when your brain is in a positive state. 37% better sales. Doctors perform 20% faster when it comes to diagnoses and the accuracy of diagnoses when their brains are in a positive state. That's positive psychology for you. That's where we need to get to. We've got to reverse that formula. And it starts with happiness and leads to success. And the question then really is, if that is the case, and it is, science says so, can we train ourselves to be happier? I mean, can you imagine at an advice IFA conference, we're talking about training for happiness? Yes, and it's all science, guys, it really is. So there are many ways we can train ourselves to be happy, to reverse this process. You can Google them. I want to suggest just 4 as I close that probably have the most significant impact on your mental health and happiness. And I think there it is. The first one is savor, all right? Savor is really just, it's pausing. It's lingering in the moment. It's being mindful of what's happening to you and appreciating the good things that are around you. It's savoring the moment. It's milking the moment. It's whether it's preparing a meal with a family, hanging out with friends, telling a great news story. Just tell it big. Own the moment. Just love that presence. Love being in that savoring moment. In fact, the scientist that came up with the concept of savoring and its impact on positive psychology says there's 3 ways you can savor. You can savor the past, that's reminiscing. So yes, open that high school yearbook and go through those family home videos often because it's good for you. Reminiscing, memories are great. It says you can savor the future, the whole idea of anticipating what's to come. Then if you know this, but just thinking about that next vacation that you're going on will raise your endorphin levels by 27%. Such a nerd. I'm embarrassed when I say stuff like that, but it's true. Again, I'm trying to show you, not opinion, not like, wah-wah science. This is science. That's savoring. The next thing you can do is aspire. All right, this is this whole idea of in fact, I think gratitude is next. No, let's go back to aspire. Aspire is just this whole idea of hope, of purpose. Study after study shows that people that have meaning in their lives are just way happier. A guy called Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It came out of his experiences in the German concentration camps during the World War, and he really discovered that people that were surviving, that should have died, or people that should have died were surviving, and people that should have survived were dying. And the difference was those that had a why survived. Talks about a composer in the camp, an elderly gentleman who was a violinist who had composed a symphony in his head and wanted to perform it at a Viennese concert hall when he got out. He survived because he had a why, a sense of purpose and meaning. In fact, Viktor Frankl used this phrase, if a person has a why to live, he can handle almost any how. Aspire. So important for optimism and for positivity. Gratitude. If ever there was a wonder drug, it's gratitude. Gratitude is I keep telling my kids, the antidote to entitlement. It's that thing that helps you dampen the need for more. Just being grateful for what you have, for who you have around you, and for what people have done for you. There are some studies on this thing called the gratitude journal. Don't roll your eyes like I did. I'm like, what, the gratitude journal? No. It's a lot simpler than you think. And here's the science. If you were to do that today, starting today, write down 3 things at the end of the day. Just 3 things that you're grateful for, be it a good cup of coffee, a great conversation, a lovely car, whatever that is. 3 times a day, or just 3 things every day for 3 weeks, you increase your mental health, your happiness by 25%, and it lasts for 6 months. 3 weeks of work, 6 months benefit. So says science. That's the power of gratitude. Finally, revive. Well, silly word, revive. It really just means good physical health. There's no mental health without physical health. If you want an immediate boost to happiness, if you want to train for happiness, exercise, guys. And be healthy. The 3 pillars of good health: eat, sleep, and move. Eat more real food, eat less junk food. Sleep at least 7 hours a night. Gentlemen, this one just for you. I don't know if you know this, but men who sleep 5 hours or less have significantly smaller testicles than men who sleep 7 hours or more. Just giving you the facts, all right? You need 7 hours, because otherwise we know stuff about you, so. And finally, movement, exercise. Man, if ever there was a great drug for immediately boosting positivity and happiness, it's exercise. Those little things, happy hormones, endorphins, you get them with every little bit of exercise you do. It used to be known as the runner's high. It's not just for runners, it's any kind of exercise. In fact, the more intensely you work out, or the more intensely you exercise, the higher your levels of endorphins and the higher the happiness that you experience. And in fact, those endorphins were compared to Prozac in a study, and they found no statistical difference between endorphins or exercise and Prozac when it came to managing mild to moderate depression. That's how effective exercise is when it comes to training yourself for happiness. Let me close with this. I think John Lennon nailed this. He says, "My mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. At school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment. I told them they didn't understand life." I loved that. Lennon gets it. Happiness is not dependent on success. Success is dependent on happiness. And happiness, ladies and gentlemen, is a choice. Thank you so much. Lovely sharing with you guys. All yours, my father.